right, so this is a Screencastify for you for pages 5 through 10 of Night, and I'm going to talk you through it. And if you remember at the end of class, Moishi the Beetle, who is kind of like he is like a priest or a preacher, the equivalent to that, meaning that he is the Jewish equivalent to that. He's kind of taken on teaching um, Ellie to about the mysticism, the Kabbalah. And so they spend a lot of time talking about that. And so here on page 5, I'll just read these couple paragraphs to you. One evening, I told him how unhappy I was not to be able to find in Siget a master to teach me the Zohar, the Kabbalistic works, the secrets of Jewish mysticism. He smiled indulgently. After a long silence, he said, "There are 1,001 gates allowing entry into the orchard of mystical truth. Every human being has his own gate. He must not err and wish to enter the orchard through a gate other than his own. That would present a danger not only for the one entering, but also for those who are already inside." So these are some pretty deep thoughts here. So Moishi is he's just saying there are a lot of different ways to learn, and there isn't just one way, and to be patient. And Moishi the Beetle, the poorest of the poor of Siget, spoke to me for hours on end about the Kabbalah's revelations and its mysteries. Thus began my initiation. Together we would read over and over again the same page of the Zohar, not to learn it by heart, but to discover within the very essence of divinity. Divinity, like you can see part of that word when you have ity at the end. It's actually this after you remove the suffix, it's divine, meaning godly like or otherworldly. And in the course of those evenings, I became convinced that Moishi the Beetle would help me enter eternity, into that time when question and answer would become one. So Elliot is very concerned about understanding and being one with his God. And his faith is going to become super important to him as we proceed through the book. So it's really important for you to understand this. All right, things start to change here on page 6. And then, you can see that with this transition here. And then one day, all foreign Jews were expelled, meaning they were thrown out from Siget. And Moishi the Beetle was a foreigner. Crammed into cattle cars by the Hungarian police, they cried silently. Standing on the station platform, we too were crying. The train disappeared over the horizon. All that was left was thick, dirty smoke. Behind me, someone said, sighing, "What do you expect? That's war." The deportees were quickly forgotten. Deportee means they are being taken away, deported. A few days after they left, it was rumored that they were in Galicia, working, and even that they were content with their fate. Days went by, then weeks and months. Life was normal again. A calm, reassuring wind blew through our homes. The shopkeepers were doing good business. The students lived among their books, and the children played in the streets. One day, as I was about to enter the synagogue, I saw Moishi the Beetle sitting on a bench near the entrance. He told me what had happened to him and his companions. The train with the deportees had crossed the Hungarian border and, once in Polish territory, had been taken over by the Gestapo. The train had stopped. The Jews were ordered to get off and onto waiting trucks. The trucks headed toward a forest. There, everybody was ordered to get out. They were forced to dig huge trenches. Trenches are like long holes. When they had finished their work, the men from the Gestapo began theirs. Without passion or haste, they shot their prisoners, who were forced to approach the trench one by one and offer their necks. Infants were tossed into the air and used as targets for the machine guns. This took place in the Galatian forest near Ptolemy. How had he, Moishe the beetle, been able to escape? By a miracle. He was wounded in the leg and left for dead. So that is a very horrific scene. This happened to Moishe the beetle, and he came back and he told Ellie about this. If you heard something like that, I'm sure you would be alarmed and wonder if that was going to happen to you. We'll see that it might be a little bit different for the Jewish people of Saget. Like, they may not believe him because he was poor and he's kind of an outsider, and so they might be reluctant to believe his stories. Day after day, night after night, he went from one Jewish house to the next, telling his story, and that of Malka, the young girl who lay dying for 3 days, and that of Toby, the tailor who begged to die before his sons were killed. Moishe was not the same. The joy in his eyes was gone. He no longer sang. He no longer mentioned either God or Kabbalah. He spoke only of what he had seen. But people not only refused to believe his tales, they refused to listen. Some even insinuated that he only wanted their pity, that he was imagining things. Others flatly said that he had gone mad. As for Moishe, he wept and pleaded, "Jews, listen to me. That's all I ask of you. No money, no pity, just listen to me." He kept shouting in synagogue between the prayer at dusk and the evening prayer. Even I did not believe him. I often sat with him after services and listened to his tales, trying to understand his grief, but all I felt was pity. "They think I'm mad," he whispered, and tears like drops of wax flowed from his eyes. Once I asked him the question, "Why do you want people to believe you so much? In your place, I would not care whether they believe me or not." He closed his eyes as if to escape time. "You don't understand," he said in despair. "You cannot understand. I was saved miraculously. I succeeded in coming back. Where did I get my strength? I wanted to return to Saget to describe to you my death so that you might ready yourselves while there is still time. Life? I no longer care to live. I am alone. But I wanted to come back to warn you. Only no one is listening to me." This was toward the end of 1942. Thereafter, life seemed normal once again. So 1942 is the heart of World War II. There's still a long way to go before the arrival of the Allies to free the Jewish people. So that's a long time to go. So thereafter, life seemed normal once again. London radio, which we listened to every evening, announced encouraging news: the daily bombings of Germany and Stalingrad, the preparation of the Second Front. And so we, the Jews of Saget, waited for better days that surely were to come. I continued to devote myself to my studies, Talmud during the day and Kabbalah at night. My father took care of his business and the community. My grandfather came to spend Rosh Hashanah with us so as to attend the services of the celebrated Rebbe of Borscht. My mother is beginning to think it was high time to find an appropriate match for Hilda. Thus passed the year 1943. Spring 1944. Splendid news from the Russian front. There could no longer be any doubt. Germany would be defeated. It was only a matter of time, months or weeks perhaps. The trees were in bloom. It was a year like so many others, with its spring, its engagements, its weddings, and its births. The people were saying, "The Red Army is advancing with giant strides. Hitler would not be able to harm us, even if he wants to." Yes, we even doubted his resolve to exterminate us. Annihilate an entire people? Annihilate means to kill and destroy. Wipe out a population dispersed throughout so many nations, so many million of people? By what means? In the middle of the 20th century? And thus my elders concerned themselves with all manner of things: strategy, diplomacy, politics, and Zionism, but not with their own fate. Zionism is the study of the Jewish religion. Even Moshe the beetle had fallen silent. He was weary of talking. He would drift through synagogue or through the streets, hunched over, eyes cast down, avoiding people's gaze. In those days, it was still possible to buy emigration certificates to Palestine. I had asked my father to sell everything, to liquidate everything, and to leave. I am too old, my son, he answered. Too old to start a new life. Too old to start from scratch in some distant land. Budapest radio announced that the fascist party had seized power. The regent, Miklos Horthy, was forced to ask a leader of the pro-Nazi Nihilist party to form a new government. Yet we still were not worried. Of course, we had heard of the fascists, but it was all in the abstract. It meant nothing more to us than a change of ministry. The next day brought really disquieting news. German troops had penetrated Hungarian territory with the government's approval. So now the war is coming closer to them. The German troops are coming into Hungary. Finally, people began to worry in earnest. One of my friends, Moshe Chaim Berkowitz, returned from the capital for Passover and told us, the Jews of Budapest live in an atmosphere of fear and terror. Anti-Semitic acts take place every day in the streets, on the trains. The fascists attack Jewish stores, synagogues. The situation is becoming very serious. The news spread through Siget like wildfire. Soon that was all people talked about, but not for long. Optimism soon revived. The Germans will not come this far. They will stay in Budapest for strategic reasons, for political reasons. In less than 3 days, German army vehicles made their appearance on our streets. Anguish. German soldiers with their steel helmets and their death's head emblem. Still, our first impressions of the Germans were rather reassuring. The officers were billeted in private homes, even in Jewish homes. This means that they were going to stay in the homes. Like people were told, you are having a soldier come and live with you, and you don't really have any say in it. Their attitude toward their host was distant but polite. They never demanded the impossible, made no offensive remarks, and sometimes even smiled at the lady of the house. A German officer lodged in the Khan's house across the street from us. We were told he was a charming man, calm, likable, and polite. 3 days after he moved in, he brought Mrs. Khan a box of chocolates. The optimists were jubilant. Well, what did we tell you? You wouldn't believe us. There they are, your Germans. What do you say now? Where is their famous cruelty? The Germans were already in our town. The fascists were already in power. The verdict was already out, and the Jews of Siget were still smiling. So this is the setup so far. As far as the Germans came into Hungary, they came into Siget, and they are now staying. The soldiers are staying in the homes of the Jewish people, and they're behaving. They're not killing people. They're not sending them to ghettos or anything at this point. But that is about to change. So the Germans have created this feeling of calm, so that it just kind of happens in slow motion, the things that they start to do to the Jewish people in town. And it starts here with Passover. So the 8 days of Passover. The weather was sublime. My mother was busy in the kitchen. The synagogues were no longer open. People gathered in private homes. No need to provoke the Germans. Almost every rabbi's home became a house of prayer. We drank, we ate, we sang. The Bible commands us to rejoice during the 8 days of celebration, but our hearts were not in it. We wished the holiday would end so as not to have to pretend. On the 7th day of Passover, the curtain finally rose. The Germans arrested the leaders of the Jewish community. From that moment on, everything happened very quickly. The race toward death had begun. The first edict edict or directions or demands, Jews were prohibited from leaving their residence for 3 days under penalty of death. So this was the first thing that happened to the Jewish people. Moshe the beadle came running to our house. I warned you, he shouted, and left without waiting for a response. So the Germans create this false sense of calm, and then they start having these demands, and they start taking over the Jewish people in the town.